everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Burke, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the team on Smurfit Executive Development to welcome you to this, our third in our series of webinars. Today, April 22nd, will be delivered by Dr. Mark Rowe. Dr. Mark Rowe is a practicing GP for over 25 years. He is a recognized thought leader in the area of lifestyle medicine and corporate well-being. And Mark has delivered on the UCD Smurfit Senior Leadership Programme. Before handing over to Mark, I'd encourage you to use the Zoom chat function during the webinar this morning to pop up questions that you may have as we go along. Mark will answer a few of the questions during the course of the webinar, and afterwards we'll collate the questions and answers, and I'll share them with you along with the recording later today or tomorrow morning. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your valuable day to join with me to talk about how to manage stress and better avoid burnout in these uncertain times. You know, there is no doubt that, the world has changed so much in the last few weeks with COVID-19. The world certainly seems smaller. This change feels permanent, though I know it's only temporary. And as somebody said to me recently, it's like, after 9/11, airline travel was never quite the same again. I think there is this sense that things will never quite be the same again, whatever that new sense of normality is eventually going to be. And particularly in the world of work, I think there's been huge changes. People have moved towards remote working from home, and all the challenges that's bringing. There's no doubt that many people have been feeling increasingly isolated and disconnected despite the advent of technology. And, the novelty of working from home can wear off pretty quickly as people try and figure out what this new normal really is. Dealing with distraction, dealing with disruption, and the challenge of trying to remain productive with everything that's going on. And, not only have things changed so much with COVID-19, but many people that I've been speaking to as a doctor have been talking about, having a sense of loss, a loss not just of normality and a loss of human connection, but a loss of the little things like being able to go for a cup of coffee with a close friend. And, that's been bringing a lot of fear and a lot of additional stress and anxiety. So this is very, very real, what we were talking about this morning. And what I'm going to do in my talk is I'm going to talk about, stress and anxiety, what the physical and psychological effects of that might look like. We're going to look at the importance of contagion, particularly emotional contagion, what you can focus on in terms of what you can control versus what you can't control, and then obviously some self-care strategies to enable you to simply think, feel, and be closer to your creative best each and every day. So just to start by talking about stress and anxiety. I mean, anxiety and stress is a normal reaction. It's a normal emotional response. The amygdala in the brain, the emotional alarm clock, as I call it, it pumps out signals to amp up levels of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, allowing you to get ready for the fight or flight response. In other words, allowing you to take action, allowing you to perform. So, I don't ever talk about trying to eradicate stress. I think really the idea is trying to embrace it, allowing yourself to recharge from stress so that you can simply be closer to your best world. And, as you are under a certain amount of stress and anxiety, performance will increase. You will become more productive. You'll become more task orientated. You'll be better able to really perform as a leader and in the world of work and also at home. But when you go past what I call a tipping point, that's a point of optimal stress. Now you're into negative stress territory. Now you're into a space where stress is having a negative impact on how you feel, on how you perform. And that is a recipe for not just the consequences of negative stress, but potentially accelerating you on that route towards potentially emotional exhaustion and burnout. So from a physical point of view, when you're feeling stressed and anxious, your blood pressure will go up, your heart rate will get faster, you might get a dry mouth, sweaty palms, a knot in your tummy. And these are all symptoms of the fight and flight response readying you for appropriate action. And of course, if that carries on a long-term basis, when you're suffering from chronic negative stress, in essence, it's as if your body is marinating in cortisol day in and day out. And that leads to long-term inflammation and an accelerated risk of many long-term chronic adverse health conditions, from diabetes, heart disease, and so on. From a psychological point of view, stress really shuts off the logical thinking, rational part of your brain and allows your emotional alarm clock, your amygdala, to take over. So as your logical part of your brain shuts down, your attention span becomes narrowed, you lose your sense of perspective, you become more reactive and less responsive, your temper can become frayed, you can become more edgy, more irritable. And, you know, if this persists over time, you may begin to feel emotionally exhausted, a lack of personal accomplishment. You might feel, you know, hypercritical, and that, you know, simply that the harder you work, the less and less you're getting done. These can all be cardinal symptoms of burnout. They talk about the 3 Ps of chronic psychological negative stress: the sense that something is permanent rather than temporary, the sense that it's personal to you rather than a generalized effect, and that it is pervasive. In other words, that it impacts on every aspect of your well-being. I just want to talk for a minute about the importance of contagion, because I think this is a really, really important point to consider when you're thinking about the current situation of stress and anxiety and coronavirus. From the time that we are young children, we are hardwired to copy, mimic, and imitate the emotional reactions of those people around us. So what that means is we will copy these emotional states, we will actually feel them, act them out in our own lives, and then pass them on to other people, as they will then pass them back to us. So this virtual cycle of negative contagion. And I think that's really important at the moment when you're looking at your sources of media, when you're looking at social media, to understand that the negative news doesn't happen in isolation, that your brain is like a sponge soaking up all its exposures. And if you expose yourself to enough negative, cynical, toxic noise, that's going to come out in your life. More recently, fascinating research in Yale University has shown that emotion can be contagious to 3 degrees of separation, impacting not just your friends, but their friends and their friends too. So emotion can be incredibly contagious. As I like to say, emotion needs motion. Emotion needs to flow through us. What I mean by that is, don't resist, don't block, don't suppress negative emotion, because what you resist will persist. Whereas what you embrace, you'll be better able to face, and you'll be able to start to erase. So that's the thing about emotion, is if we deny or suppress or block it, the effects of it become even more magnified in terms of how we feel and in terms of our daily lives. Whereas if we accept it, if we embrace it, the effect of it is somewhat dissolved, which is why I like to say, face your fears, address your anxiety, shine the light on your suffering, and you'll help to dissolve that suffering. And that was shown by fMRI scans. They're living, breathing brain scans. When people had their brain scanned and they were shown scary images, the emotional alarm clock, the amygdala, lit up, obviously for the stress response. Then people were asked to name the emotion they were experiencing. I feel scared, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, etc. And the emotional alarm clock calmed down. So being able to name your emotion is a powerful way to helping to dissolve it. I just want to share with you an idea that I often use with my patients, which I call which I call pause, pressing the pause button. So if you're having a day or a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling very stressed, you're feeling very anxious, just press pause for a moment. P means pause. A means become aware of how you're feeling in your body right now. Perhaps you feel uptight. Perhaps you have a knot in your tummy, and perhaps you're clenching your teeth. Just become aware of how you're actually feeling. U means understand. Understand that you are not your emotions. Understand that you are not this feeling of anxiety or stress or edginess that you're experiencing right now. And S is simply breathe. S is simply breathe, and E is exhale. Breathe out your feelings of stress. Breathe out your feelings of anxiety. Breathe out your feelings of tension. In other words, as you breathe in feelings of security, you can breathe out your fear. As you breathe in feelings of calm, you can breathe out your anxiety. As you breathe in feelings of hope, you can breathe out your despair. So I think that pause technique, it only takes a minute. You can do it anytime, any place, anywhere. You don't need any special equipment. Nobody need know you're doing it. It's a wonderful in-the-moment response to enable you to feel more calm, more present, more responsive, more in control, and less stressed. So I might just see, are there any questions there now, Michelle, that we could take from the audience?
Hi, Mark. Yes, there is one that came in actually. It's a broader one from Genevieve James. Genevieve is one of our alumni, 2004, and is based in Hong Kong, which kind of brings the perspective of this global pandemic that we're in. Genevieve asks, do you have any tools to keep people engaged during this crisis? So I guess that's around our teams, so that they remain resilient, and also to set people up to bounce forward rather than just getting through.
Yeah, I mean, I love that term, bounce forward, you know, not just bounce back. I mean, that really means growing from adversity and developing real resilience. I think, you know, in the world we're in right now, Michelle, I think what I would talk about the 4 or 5 C approach. So first C I would say is communicate, communicate, communicate. You've got to communicate very clearly. You've got to communicate very consistently. You probably got to over communicate with your people right now, because people are in a really, really vulnerable place. People are really very much out of their comfort zone. And, you know, it's so important to connect. And, you know, I think people should connect much more often. Perhaps if you're used to talking to your team members once a fortnight, do it at least once a week, maybe twice a week. Do it for less time, but connect more often. You got to really show that you care, because we are all human beings. We're not human doings. We're not KPIs of economic activity. We're human beings. And right now, people are dealing with a lot of extra challenges working from home. They may not be able to delegate caring for young children in the current pandemic situation. They may be concerned about elderly relatives. They may have older children that are doing exams. So there can be a lot of things going on in the mix. So to show that you care by asking people, how do you feel? How do you really feel? How can we best support you during this time? I think is really, really important. And I think, you know, it's always important to find opportunities to allow you to celebrate with your team members. I think recognition and reward programs have been shown consistently to be very important for, you know, improving engagement. And, you know, I've met a lot of people over the years, Michelle, who've been, you know, downtrodden, and I've very rarely met somebody who was over celebrated or over recognized for the great work they're doing. So I think it's something to be extra mindful of when we're in this remote working environment. And the last thing I'd say on this, Michelle, is it's important to cut yourself some slack as well, you know, because we're in a world right now where good enough has to be good enough. It's not about being perfect anymore. Let's just do a good enough job each day. I think writing down 3 things every night that you feel grateful for is a great way to reconnect with the essence of who you are. It's a great reminder of what's important, a great reminder for you to stay true to your values. And you know, writing things down, even just writing down a very simple to-do list in the morning, ticking those 2 or 3 things off, can give you a great sense of achievement that you've had a good enough day, even if it hasn't been as potentially productive as it would have been in these pre-COVID times.
Thank you, Mark.
Which brings me on to this whole idea of what you can versus what you can't control. I mean, I'm a big fan of philosophers, and you know, there's one of the greatest of all the Stoic philosophers was Epictetus, who wrote the Enchiridion, which was chapter after chapter of all the things in this world that we can't control, and the one thing you can, which is your own attitude, your own ability to choose how to respond in any given situation. And I think that's a really, really important resilience tool, the power to focus on what you can control, because it actually empowers the logical thinking, reflective part of your brain to take ownership over the emotional alarm clock or amygdala. You see, normally the amygdala or emotional alarm clock controls your logical thinking brain. That's why you can't outthink how you feel, because the emotional alarm clock is so much more powerful than the logical thinking part of your brain. But when you focus on what you can control, you can quieten your emotional alarm clock down, and you can ramp up the logical thinking part of your brain. So I think it's always useful to just have a quick reminder that no matter what's going on in the world, there is so much that you can actually control. So you can control your self-care habits, you can control the amount of sleep you get, you can control your exercise, you can control you know, your self-development, you can control the social media you listen to, you can control the support structures you have around you, because we all need people around us that are going to strengthen and support us, encourage and empower us, challenge and convince us to grow. So focusing on what you can control is really, really important. And, you know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross many years ago wrote this book called The Five Stages of Grief. And, you know, when she spoke about denial, she spoke about anger, she spoke about bargaining, she spoke about sadness. And then the 5th stage of grief, and they don't always happen in the same order, is acceptance. And I think really focusing on what you can control does bring you to acceptance. And I think acceptance of what you can control and what you can't is a really, really powerful resilience tool, and a really important idea in this whole idea of how you can embrace stress more effectively and prevent yourself from burning out. So now I want to get on to some self-care strategies to enable you to think, feel, and be closer to your creative best. And, you know, I believe self-care is not selfish care. I talk about this a lot, and people sometimes say, well, Mark, is self-care not being self-centered? Absolutely not. I'm saying that when you allow yourself to embrace the idea of holistic self-care, not some sort of narcissistic, ego-centered, self-centered form of self-care, a holistic form of self-care, not only are you better, but the people around you are better as well, not just your work colleagues that you may be connecting with now more remotely, but your family members, your loved ones, your friends. Everybody benefits because, as I said earlier, emotion is so incredibly contagious. And there are so many things you can do to really embrace your self-care. So, you know, I'm a great fan of Benjamin Franklin. He said, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. This whole idea of getting to bed earlier, having a wind down time at night. I mean, a lot of us have an alarm clock to get up in the morning, but having a wind down time at night, maybe 9 o'clock, whatever it is, where you are now getting into wind down phase for sleep, because sleep isn't just something that automatically happens. It takes time to wind down. And, you know, I think blue wavelength light from your mobile phone, it inhibits melatonin release from the brain, which not only delays the onset of sleep, it reduces the quality of the sleep that you get. And if you don't get a good quality night's sleep, which for most of us is 7.5 to 8 hours a night, then the next day you're going to feel more stressed, you're going to feel more anxious, you're going to feel more irritable, and your attention and focus and concentration will be impaired. On top of that, you may crave more carb-rich calories, your willpower will be depleted, your energy will be down, your vitality will be off. So, you know, if there's one thing I could say about self-care, I think feeling well today, living with vitality today started last night by giving yourself a good night's sleep. So giving yourself, you know, 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, I think is a great way to really improve your self-care. Eating good food, I'm not going to say too much about food, but certainly eating real food, eating food that's nutritious, that's good for you, eating lots of color, lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, foods that are broken down slowly, and staying away from too much processed foods or foods that are high in sugar and additives. I also think it's really a good idea to eat within a window, a time window. I recommend about no more than 12 hours a day. And just with that idea of the wind down time at night, to certainly stop eating by 8 p.m., which allows you to go to bed on an empty tummy, which maximizes recharge and allows you to feel more energized the following morning. Exercise, I mean, I call exercise the greatest pill of all. It really is so incredibly good for you to dissolve feelings of negative stress, reduce feelings of anxiety. It brings on a whole range of brain chemicals, neurochemicals. I call it the biochemical cocktail of brilliance. Serotonin allowing you to feel more positive, oxytocin allowing you to feel more connected and engaged with the world, dopamine, which boosts motivation, noradrenaline, which helps to dampen anxiety, and also natural painkillers called endorphins, which can allow you to feel more calm, more energized and optimistic. And I really think no matter what's going on, and even in these COVID challenge times, it's never too late to begin to exercise more. It's never too late to begin to move more. And no matter how tired you think you are, no matter how busy you believe you are, I really think making some time to exercise and move each day is so incredibly good for you. I think exercise first thing in the morning, when you get out of bed, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, you can go out in your back garden if you're lucky enough to have one. You can jog on the spot. You can even jog in your kitchen. You know, I mean, it's really, really simple to exercise and move, and the benefits are so phenomenal. So if you exercise early in the morning, you may have benefits that will last for up to 14 hours throughout your day. So I really think exercise, the greatest benefit of exercise is what it does for the space between your two ears, allowing you to de-stress and feel more calm, energized, optimistic, and more present. So I want to talk next about gratitude, because, you know, gratitude is wanting what you have rather than simply having what you want. And I spoke earlier about the fight or flight stress response, you know, the emotional alarm clock, getting us ready for action, getting us ready for performance. But there is a yang to that yin of the fight or flight response. There is a natural counterbalance to stress, and that is de-stress, that is recharge from stress. And that is, as I say, getting back to vagus, plugging into the parasympathetic nervous system. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It connects the back of the brain to the heart. And, you know, when you express gratitude, you plug into that parasympathetic nervous system. And it really isn't possible to feel grateful on the one hand and stressed, anxious, or hostile on the other. It's a tremendous way. I call it an antidote to anxiety, an antidote to stress and needless negativity. I mentioned earlier about writing down 3 three things, WWW, what went well, three things every night that went well that day. But also three things you feel grateful for. It might be a keystone in your life, a key relationship, some aspect of your health. It might be, it could be anything. Secondly, it could be a very small little thing, like I'm looking out this morning and the beautiful blue sky here in the sunny southeast of Ireland. And the third thing might be just some ordinary little thing of the day. Just for me, I'm grateful to be doing this webinar this morning and just trying to have a positive impact on the lives of other people, because for me, my life is all about a life of service. So whatever it is, people would often say to me, Mark, I feel grateful, and that is great. But when you take the time to literally write down those three things, it's a great way to dissolve feelings of needless negativity. And if you're willing to do it even once a week for 10 weeks, research has shown that it can boost your inner feelings of happiness and contentment by at least 10%. It can also strengthen your immune system, lower your blood pressure, improve the quality of your sleep. So there's so many tremendous benefits to expressing gratitude. I just want to mention the whole word kind, being kind. Kindness is a word that people are talking about a lot lately. Kindness, being compassionate to others. Yes, absolutely. It is important to be more patient. As I said, cut people some more slack at the moment, but also to be kinder to yourself. And, I think it is important to remember we all have an inner critic that's on probably 24/7 and, always judging. And, it can be hard to cut yourself some slack in these challenging times. So it's important to remember to be kind to yourself, value yourself, give yourself the self-care, the basic self-care needs that you need to perform effectively. And I think kindness is really, it's a tremendous way to recharge from stress and plug back into Vegas as well. So I just want to speak next about the health benefits of spending time in nature. I mean, I just can't speak highly enough about nature. I mean, Einstein put it very well. He said, look deeply into nature and you'll understand everything far more clearly. And, what's very, very interesting is to recognize, the restorative benefits of spending time in nature. It is very, very therapeutic. It can enable you to get into what's called a flow state, where you shut off the emotional alarm clock, where you become much more creative, you become much more calm. Research from Stanford University has shown that, even a half an hour walk, a short walk in nature can double the creative ideas and solutions that people can come up with if they're facing a challenging problem. So it really does make you more creative. It does really open up perspective and imagination in the brain. And of course, it can plug you into a sense of awe and perspective of being part of something bigger than yourself. So there are some really tremendous health benefits to being in nature. So Michelle, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask at this juncture?
I'm just looking through the chat here, Mark, and yes. There's a number of comments from our
Hello? Can you hear me, Michelle? Hello? I'm going to keep talking, Michelle, because I think I've kind of lost you there for a second. So just apologies to the participants there. I was talking about the health benefits of being in nature, and it really, really is interesting that spending time in nature can be so incredibly good to lower feelings of stress, to lower anxiety, to boost your mood, and have such a restorative benefit in terms of an impact on vigor and vitality. And there's been a lot of research done in Japan on this area. They call it forest bathing, which is where you immerse yourself in nature using your five senses. So you immerse yourself in nature with from a sight point of view, from a smell, from a sound, from a feeling or touch point of view, and you know, spending time in nature through an immersive experience can be really, really so good for you. And part of it, of course, is to do with the fractal patterns. Fractal patterns are these asymmetrical, repetitive patterns that you'll see when you look at branches of a tree, when you look at flowers, when you look at just simply a view of nature. And it seems that the retina, which is the screen at the back of the eye, is hardwired to pick up on these fractal patterns and identify with them as a source of recharge, as a source of restoration from stress. So simply looking at these fractal patterns can be so incredibly good for you. And that is why you can bring the concept of forest bathing into your own home, into your own office, by just having a lovely picture of nature on your computer screen. That in itself can have some restorative benefits. And of course, a lot of plants and trees produce phytoncides, and phytoncides are chemicals that trees use to, in a way, communicate with each other, in a way to fight off viruses and fungi and bacteria and so on. And these phytoncides seem to have health benefits in terms of lowering the stress response, boosting the immune system, and allowing us to feel much better. Dr. King Lee, who was the originator of forest bathing in Japan, had some fantastic results when he took middle-aged Japanese businessmen for walks in the forest, and found that he was able to reduce their cortisol levels by 16% after a 45-minute walk in nature, as well as having a positive impact on their blood pressure. So, you know, it seems that spending time in nature, and I recommend, you know, get out in nature every day if you can, but if you can't do that, and many people can't, depending on where they're living and so on, you know, about 5 hours a month in nature, about an hour a week, seems to have tremendous health benefits. So I was talking earlier about the 5 stages of grief and really getting to this stage of acceptance. And I think there is a 6th stage, and this has been written about, a guy called David Kessler, that comes past acceptance and this meaning. And this is to the question from your colleague in Hong Kong, Michelle, earlier, which spoke about, you know, bouncing forward rather than just bouncing back. And I think meaning, cultivating a strong sense of meaning, does allow you to grow from adversity. It does allow you to kind of bounce forward, as it were, rather than simply bouncing back. And I think Viktor Frankl put it very well. He wrote that very, very powerful book. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it, Man's Search for Meaning, when he said that in the end, the last of the human freedoms is the power each of us has to choose how to respond in any given moment. That we have the power to choose how to respond, that we don't have to simply react to our environment or our circumstances, that we can choose how to respond. And I really believe that acceptance and acknowledgement is really the starting point for resilience. It's not about denying or suppressing or trying to ignore what's going on. Acceptance becomes a new starting point for resilience, a new starting point to move forward, one step, one day at a time. A mindset change from scarcity to abundance, a mindset change from trying to eradicate stress to being better able to embrace stress. And really, it's really all about changing the question from what have I lost to how can I grow? So I'm going to leave this open for the next 5 minutes to allow any
Actually,
of the
Mark?
participants. Yes?
Mark, apologies. My mic went off earlier. There was a question I'd like to share with
perfect.
you.
Please do.
So a number of our participants, I could be repeating myself now, excuse me, but a number of our participants shared that they're leading organisations where the organisation has to close temporarily and they've had to leave, let staff go, which is very challenging. And this leads into another question that was shared. In your opinion, will there be a tide of PTSD after the crisis? And it reminds me of conversations that you and I have had about the experience you've had around the recessionary period of 2008 to 2012. And I wonder, whilst this is different, in your experience, what can people, I suppose, are there tips on how people can manage this situation with regard to that piece around PTSD recurring?
Well, I think that's always a possibility, and it really depends how people do people react adversely to the stress or do people adapt and respond to it. So, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder can be transformed into post-traumatic growth. And really it's about resilience. It's really about your own mindset. It's about how you choose to see things. And I really believe that question I ended on there, Michelle, moving it from what have I lost to how can I grow? How can I use this situation to work on my own self-development? How can I see things a little bit differently? You know, that's really, it's that sense of control that we all need as human beings. It's to understand that we can do something, and taking that first step is very, very important. Obviously, I think the questioner is right. Some people vary enormously in terms of what I would call the strength of their resilience, their inner resilience, the resilient skills they've cultivated and developed over time. So, you know, some people will have a very strong buffer in terms of being able to protect themselves and being able to bounce back, and some people don't. And you know, we are in a very, very challenging situation. But I really think it's about understanding that we all have the power to do something to get into a better place, and where things were isn't necessarily where things are going to be. And I do think as well, it's important to say, Michelle, that if anybody listening to this or anybody listening to this knows somebody who is who's struggling, who is you know, who's displaying evidence of a low mood, or if somebody listening has significant sleep disturbance, black thoughts, low mood, significant anxiety, please reach out to your doctor for professional advice. Your doctor is always there to help and support you and can signpost you in the right direction. Whether, you know, sometimes counseling or what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a very old idea, goes back thousands of years, back to the time of Socrates, can be very, very helpful to support people in seeing things a little bit differently. So I suppose it's important to understand that no man is an island, no one is ever alone. And, you know, there are a lot of people that are out there to support you through this, and make sure you do reach out, whether it's to your own doctor for advice and support, whether it's to your own family and friends, to your own colleagues at work and so on. That don't isolate yourself.
Super. That's great. I see lots of questions coming in here now. So, Mark, I'm going to say, because we had said that we would run this for 45 minutes. You're going to share with everybody that you and I are going to go through these questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to be a resource in any way that I can. We will go through the questions. We'll get back to you as best we can with answers. And, you know, stay positive, stay engaged, stay grateful, stay present, and stay hopeful, because, you know, feelings of hope always trump fear in the long term. And, you know, accepting where you are, accepting the reality of that, while at the same time hoping for a better future by understanding you could do something about it, that's really the hallmark of real resilience. So, you know, we will get out of this, and the sun will still shine in the morning. So let's all stay positive.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We will leave the chat function open for the next 5 minutes if you want to keep sharing some questions, and we'll share the recording along with a question and answer document before tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
Thank you.